So I'm seeing atheists toss around the term frith lately, and my pagan ass has got to clarify some shit. So here we go. So since discussing the term frith on my channel, I've seen it used here and there, and I wanted to offer some clarifications on the word, as well as another term that's often used alongside it, which is grith. Now, if you're heathen, you've probably already heard these terms used within the community, and the general difference that is stated often is that grith is between two communities that would otherwise be at odds, and that frith is used between close friends and kinsmen. These words have relationships with the terms innengard and utengard, and which those words can be massively oversimplified into insider and outsider. Innengard being insider, utengard being outsider. Inner yard and outer yard is what they translate to directly. But these terms are way more complex than that, and they're often misused even among heathens. So, but let's jump into this. I want to give a special shout out to my good friend and fellow heathen Beofeld, who has been key to my personal understanding of these terms and developing a historical context to them. And I'll link to his blog on this subject down below for anybody who wants to read up on the historical usage of frith and grith. So frith and grith both refer to peace and peacemaking. Both have terms that also refer to peace breaking, and both have examples that cross boundaries between family and outsider. Grith can be established within a family, and frith can be established between people who would otherwise be enemies. So, as usual, I want to discuss terms. And in the case of frith and grith, frith is going to be the generalized term, and grith is going to be the specialized. And the specialization that grith applies is a limitation on time and space. So the modern definition of frith that I've given on my channel before is a mutual agreement to avoid causing each other physical, emotional, and mental harm, and to avoid negatively affecting each other's honor, worth, and luck. So grith would be a modification of that, a temporary granting of this agreement, or an agreement offered in a special place. Historically, grith would be offered between two groups for peace, that might be guaranteed by a regular payment of tribute or the designation of a sacred space. In the story of the war between the gods, the Aesir and Vanir War, they established grith, or a truce, before having a peace meeting and established frith. And this usage shows that grith was thought to be temporary, but frith was formal and lasting until broken. Grith is also a functional agreement that can be made about a localized space or an event, a space where special rules are enforced by a king or a temple, and this was called hand-grith, which means that these special rules were enforced by the hand of those in charge of the space. A fight breaking out in a church would be a violation of this grith, and stealing from somebody in such a space would be a violation of grith. Another example is the king might call a thing, which would be a meeting of people or nobles, at which point grith would be declared so that people may speak freely. Grith would be granted and enforced by the king, who would maintain order through himself and those that he grants the ability to enforce grith. A violation of that order would be grith breaking, and it doesn't matter what grievance or disrespect was given outside of this space of grith. Within the space, respect is required, and historically it would be used to settle differences in the effort that violence could end outside of this space. So this is going to expand the idea of frith to include any space that had special conditions or rules that were enforced to maintain peace. Grith, again, would extend to religious spaces such as a ritual gathering, or even to hospitality within a home, or the customs of polite engagement between host and guest. A family gathering, for example, is a place of grith, or should be a place of grith, in which you leave behind all grievances so that peace can be maintained, and perhaps frith can be established between those who have harmed each other, because the point of grith is to allow an opportunity for frith. And at the same time, though, if you're committed to a grudge, or you don't see any reason to establish frith outside of this space with someone who abuses your respect, then your stance of respect doesn't have to continue outside of this space. The truce lasts for the time that you're there. It ends when you leave. So you can see that frith and grith are diplomatic tools from history that translate into personal life and were used in personal life. And they can be good for setting personal boundaries and commanding respect. I want to speak briefly about how this applies between polytheists and atheists, because my audience seems to have many of both. And there's ways of establishing grith with each other so that frith can be established between individuals. But that must be based on mutual respect. And when you go into each other's spaces, grith must be maintained. And this means keeping a mutual respect for one another, which means granting legitimacy to one another. There are concerns among polytheists about alliances between polytheists and atheists, and to be honest, I agree with them. Chief among these concerns are that many atheists seem intent on holding court whenever a polytheist mentions that they're a polytheist. In my years in this scene, even outside of a debate setting, I find this to be extremely common. And perhaps sometimes it's just curiosity, which is fine. I actually appreciate that. Sometimes there's actually like an aggressive bent to it, with a goal to undermine the religious guy because he's religious. So, some polytheists have really sussed out their justifications as to why they're a polytheist, and some haven't. And both of these things are fine. Just as there's atheists that have really sussed out their justifications as to why they're an atheist, and some haven't. This too is fine. But in a place of grith, it's not really the business of atheists to set up an inquisition to determine whether or not the polytheist reaches their standard of rationality. And there's many ideas of what rationality means, and not everybody spends their life nose deep in a philosophy textbook. And honestly, a lot of the people setting up these Inquisition conversations don't know that much about philosophy anyway. I'm no expert myself, but I constantly find that I've explored this topic more than the person trying to set up some kind of like gotcha question on me in a casual setting. But even in a setting of grith, I'm often down for tough conversations on a consensual basis. But not everyone is, and that should be totally cool. Atheists normally express that their issue with Christianity is that Christians attempt to convert them or attack them personally. And polytheists generally don't do that. So I don't know why some atheists, like, they want to act like evangelicals to polytheists. And honestly, from our perspective, we get that enough from Christians. We don't need it from atheists too. So something that feeds this problem is that there's like this extreme contingency of anti-theists that believes that religion is a virus to be cured.
Okay, so I would ask this same question to a Christian missionary, and not to be confrontational, but why are you so concerned with poking holes in other people's faith?
Oh, that's so the question is, why am I so concerned about poking holes in other people's faith? I'm sorry if I gave that impression. I don't want to poke holes in people's faith, and I'm really sorry if I have communicated that. I want the complete and total eradication of the faith virus.
And these guys share spaces with more tolerant atheists without conflict. And I feel like that, like, so part of it is that most atheists don't really notice the difference. I've definitely had the experience of working with like reasonable people, only to have some strong anti-theist come out of nowhere and object to me existing entirely. And I've seen firsthand atheists like realizing that their friends are assholes the first time they see something like that, or they say something while I'm around and realize something about a comment from my perspective, often without me saying anything. And with this in mind, any polytheist that engages in grith with atheists, like in this broader debate community, is opening themselves up to those kind of experiences. And some of us are totally chill with handling that kind of situation, but some of us just really aren't interested. And that should be respected as well. But it should be kept in mind that an establishment of grith can lead to an understanding of frith. And that's something that I've experienced, and it can be a hugely positive thing. So to recap a bit, the difference between frith and grith is one of permanence and impermanence. And we should stay away from the insider-outsider understanding of these terms, as they don't really historically apply. Both of these terms discuss an understanding of peace, but grith is one of limited time and or space, whereas frith is an everlasting agreement. Grith is a sense of truce with a respectful interaction, and frith can come from grith, but doesn't necessarily have to. But hey, I want to ask you guys some questions. What do you guys think of the concepts of frith and grith? Do you think that you'll find yourself using these concepts in your life? And if so, how do you think they'll be applied? I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts. And with that, I want to give a shout out to my patrons, and remember to find a way or make one.